Hello, my name is John Parker, and I'm going to present a book review for Dr. Newcomer's Latin American Revolution and Nationalism class on the book Zapata and the Mexican Revolution by John Womack, Jr. John Womack, Jr. is a highly regarded professor of Latin American history at the University of Harvard. Zapata and the Mexican Revolution is the work that elevated Womack to the position that he now holds. This is the work that literally made his career. Zapata and the Mexican Revolution is considered to be one of the most respected works on the Mexican Revolution of 1910, and for good reason. This is one of the best historical works that I have ever read. It is interesting from page one and will hold the reader's attention from beginning to end. The book tells the story of the life of Emiliano Zapata and the Zapatismo movement in the state of Morelos, Mexico. However, this book is biased. It paints most of the official revolutionaries as either inept or corrupt, and the popular revolutionaries, or Zapatistas, as the heroes of the story. Throughout this book, the readers will find themselves rooting for Zapata and his men until his untimely end in 1919. Overall, it's a fairly easy read. It is written very well, but Womack does have a tendency to throw a lot of names at the reader, and it can get very confusing. But the most important individuals in the book are repeated enough times that those names will stick in the reader's minds as they read. This is an excellent book for anyone interested in the Mexican Revolution, be they scholars or just common readers who want to expand their knowledge. To understand the Revolution of 1910, you must have a basic knowledge of who Porfirio Diaz is. Diaz was the ruler of Mexico during the era of stability, or Porfiriato, which lasted from 1876 until 1911. He came to power in a war-weary Mexico and was able to continue his rule for almost 40 years. Throughout his reign, there was growing resentment at the way in which Diaz was staying in power, and under pressure from foreign nations, he called for elections for 1910. In the book, Diaz is portrayed as a corrupt old politician. A northern Mexican intellectual named Francisco Madero became rapidly popular after he published a pamphlet which included land reform. When Diaz saw that he was going to lose to Madero, Madero was exiled to San Antonio, Texas. On November 20th, 1910, Madero made a call to arms which started the official Mexican Revolution of 1910. This revolution is the quintessential revolution in Latin America during the 20th century. It is the first revolution to take place in this century and helped shape those that came after. Through the early portions of the book, Madero is painted as a naive but well-meaning intellectual that just does not fully understand the situation in which he finds himself in. And now we enter the realm of Emiliano Zapata, the hero of our story. Zapata is the leader of the popular revolution of 1910, or Zapatismo movement, based out of the Mexican state of Morelos. The Zapatistas wanted to reestablish the ejido, the traditional communal lands in Mexico. Zapata originally declared himself a Maderista and fought for Madero in the south during the first stages of the revolution. When Zapata took power over the southern Mexican revolutionary forces, he had to lead, not command. The other revolutionary leaders in the south had strong personalities, but through Zapata's strong character, he was able to take command. When Madero ousted Diaz, Zapata expected land reform in the restoration of the ejidos, but this did not materialize because Madero did not believe in restoring the ejidos. They came together and tried to talk out their differences several times, but in the end our hero was declared an outlaw and began to fight against Madero's forces using guerrilla tactics. Madero assigned General Juvencio Robles to hunt him down and extinguish the movement. Robles was brutal towards the people of Morelos. He burnt down entire villages and practiced a policy of redistribution of populations. The people of Morelos supported the Zapatistas because they were fighting for the common villagers. Robles was an Indian fighter that took those tactics into conflict with him. This made the people of Morelos and the Zapatistas hate Madero even more. Madero sent other generals against Zapata, but Robles was the worst. None of Madero's forces ever really came close to capturing or killing Zapata. Madero was assassinated in February of 1913, and Victoriano Huerta took the reins of leadership. Zapata hated Huerta even more than he had Madero, and Huerta is portrayed in a very negative light in the book. Zapata decided that the only way in which Zapatismo could actually succeed was if the Zapatistas took the capital and ousted Huerta themselves. Francisco Pancho Villa and Venustiano Carranza were leading armies against Huerta from the north, and Zapata organized the Zapatistas into a proper army and led them from the south towards Mexico City. Zapata refused to link his army together with theirs. Throughout the popular revolution, Zapata very rarely agreed to associate his revolution with that of another. Experience had shown him, with Madero, that he could only rely fully on his own men to not let him down. Huerta was ousted on July 15, 1914, and Carranza was the one to take Mexico City. Carranza and Villa came into conflict after this over who would be the next president. They both tried to get the Zapatistas to join their side. Zapata originally sides with no one, but he eventually sided with Villa because he believed that with Villa, the ejidos had a better chance of being put back into place. Zapata also considered Carranza to be a politician in the vein of Diaz, and not to be trusted. When Zapata left Villa, he began to hear rumors that Villa was going to have him eliminated after Carranza was taken care of, but he mostly ignored these rumors for a time. But when Villa would not send arms and ammunition to the Zapatistas, Zapata packed his men up and went home to Morelos, which greatly angered Villa, but he was in no position to do anything about it. Carranza, on the other hand, thought it was great that he did not need to worry about Zapata attacking from the south. He could now fully focus on the more dangerous opponent, Villa, and this civil war of succession lasted through 1916. In late summer of 1914, peace returned to Morelos, with Carranza and his men focusing on the north. After Villa was more or less defeated, Carranza refocused his attentions on the Zapatistas. Carranza sent General Pablo Gonzalez to Morelos to mop up the situation in the state. Gonzalez administered the same tactics that Robles had tried earlier under Madero. In burning down villages and moving the populace around, he made himself and Carranza even less popular in the region. The Zapatistas could not hold their own in regular combat against Gonzalez's forces, however, so they retreated to the hills and began guerrilla campaigns against Gonzalez. Through these guerrilla war tactics, the Zapatistas annoyed the living hell out of Gonzalez, humiliating him in the process. Gonzalez was chosen in the first place because Carranza could control him. The other leading general in Carranza's army was Alvaro Obregon. Obregon was the leader that defeated Villa's forces, but he was not loyal to Carranza, and Carranza viewed him as a threat to his regime. In October of 1916, Zapata began to focus on political targets instead of military ones. This took some of the action away from the Morelos people and made Carranza look bad. In February of 1917, they changed tactics again. The Zapatistas built up their defenses and secured Morelos. Through most of 1917, there was no real fighting in Morelos. The villages were built back up, with Zapatista chiefs becoming the lead figures in the communities. Towards the end of the year, Gonzalez made a new offensive attack on Morelos. In 1919, Gonzalez finally got Zapata. He organized an ambush using an officer that Zapata had approached about joining him against the Carranza regime named Jesus Guardo. Guardo lured him into thinking he had joined the Zapatistas and had Zapata come to dinner with him. When Zapata arrived, he was met by an honor guard that opened fire and killed him. Emiliano Zapata had fallen, never to rise again. Gonzalez and Carranza believed that Zapatismo would die with its leader, but it carried on under one of Zapata's advisors, Gildardo Magana. Magana and the Zapatistas sided with Obregon against Carranza and assisted him in overthrowing the regime in 1920. Many then supported Obregon when he took office. Some even took positions in the government. Obregon put through some of the reforms that the Zapatistas had been fighting for since 1910. But Obregon was assassinated, and it was not until President Cardenas came to power in Mexico in 1934 that land reform really started to take off. I would like to talk for a moment about the biased approach that Womack talks about some of the revolutionaries in his book. He portrays the politicians and the northern intellectuals in a negative light throughout the book. Madero is portrayed as a naive idealist that cannot grasp the full situation of Mexico, and Carranza is a corrupt politician that is to blame for all of the suffering under his reign. He is portrayed as an overly cruel and vindictive character. Villa is not shown as an overly sympathetic character either, but he is not shown to be evil like Carranza. And then there's Zapata. Zapata is talked of as if he were near godlike status. It is obvious in reading this book that Womack admires the man, and honestly, after reading it, I do too. In conclusion, this book was an excellent read that I would recommend to anyone. It has a great story, is written well, and gives the reader valuable insight into the popular revolution of Mexico in 1910. Thank you for listening.